The trading station called Kelvar 9 floated in space near a dying red star. The metal walls of the station were old and damaged from many years of business and fighting. Inside the main arena, thousands of creatures from different planets had come to watch the monthly challenge. This was a brutal tradition where people settled their arguments through fighting, and warriors showed how strong they were by spilling blood. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the crowd with his worn leather jacket that showed he was one of the few humans who traveled this far into the outer reaches. He had come to Kelvar 9 to buy replacement parts for his spaceship called the Wanderer. He did not plan to watch a challenge, but the markets had closed for the event, so he had to wait. The arena floor was a perfect circle made of strong metal. It had scars and stains from countless battles over the years. Shimmering energy barriers surrounded the edges to protect the audience from weapons. Above them, small flying robots recorded every angle of the combat and showed it on screens throughout the station and beyond. The current champion stood in the center of the arena. His name was Vexthar, and he belonged to a species called the Krell. These were the top predators from the Scorpius arm of the galaxy. Vexthar stood 9 feet tall on legs that bent backward like a bird. His body was covered in a black shell that looked like polished stone. He had 4 arms that ended in sharp claws like razors. His head was triangular with special eyes that could see movement in every direction at once. Glowing blue patterns on his shell pulsed with light, showing he was ready to fight. Vexithar had been the champion for 3 cycles. He had defeated 17 challengers. Each time he won, he added to his legend. The symbol of each fallen opponent's family was carved into his armor as a trophy. The Krell believed that fighting was the truest form of talking, and Vexthar had spoken volumes with his perfect record of victories. The crowd roared as Vexthar raised one of his ceremonial blades. This curved weapon was made from the bones of his first kill. The blade caught the arena lights and threw dancing shadows across the people watching. This was the ritual that always happened. The champion would look across the crowd, searching for worthy challengers or testing the courage of the audience. Jake watched with calm interest. His hand rested easily on the railing. He had seen many alien species in his 15 years of trading across the frontier, but the Krell still impressed him with their savage grace. They were everything humanity was not. They were perfectly built for combat, faster and stronger, with natural weapons that could tear through steel. The human species had only joined the Galactic Council 40 years ago. In that time, they had earned a reputation not for strength but for being stubborn and having a strange ability to survive situations that should have killed them. Most aliens saw humans as weak. Humans had soft skin, were slow, and did not have any natural defenses. They were traders, engineers, and sometimes explorers, but never warriors. Vexthar began scanning the crowd. His compound eyes swept across the packed stands. Beings of every type pressed backward. None were willing to meet the predator's gaze. To catch Vexthar's attention meant inviting a challenge, and few were foolish enough to accept. The Krell's eyes passed over groups of Torg merchants, and their tentacles pulled back. They moved past a group of Zentari warriors who, despite their military appearance, suddenly found the floor very interesting. Even the Dravok, a species known for being fierce, turned away. Then Vexthar's scan reached Jake Morrison. The human did not look away. It was not exactly defiance. Jake simply saw no reason to flinch. He had survived pirate raids. He had navigated through dangerous ion storms. He had once talked his way out of being executed on Gamma Station. A big lizard with fancy knives did not particularly scare him. He met the creature's many-sided gaze with calm curiosity, the way someone might look at an interesting animal at a zoo. Vexthar froze. The blue glowing patterns on his body flickered strangely. The blade that had been moving in a smooth arc stopped in mid-motion. The arena fell silent. Thousands of beings held their breath at the same time. The Krell champion tilted his head in a gesture of confusion that was completely foreign to his species. His jaw parts clicked rapidly, making a sound that the translators across the arena struggled to understand. The words came through as alarm, disbelief, and recognition all at once. For 3 long heartbeats, the predator and the human locked eyes across the arena. Then Vexthar did something that had never happened before in the history of the Kelvar 9 arena. He lowered his blade and took a step backward. His posture changed from aggressive dominance to something that looked disturbingly like caution. The crowd erupted into chaos. Voices from 100 species overlapped in confusion and disbelief. Bets were canceled. Protocols were broken. Ancient traditions crumbled right there. The undefeated champion, the terror of the outer reaches, had backed down. From a human. The noise grew louder as everyone tried to understand what they had just seen. Some aliens stood up from their seats. Others pointed at Jake. Several started arguing with each other about what the gesture meant. The arena officials looked confused and began talking urgently into their communication devices. Vexthar remained still in the center of the arena. His blue patterns continued to flicker irregularly. His forearms hung at his sides and his blade pointed down at the floor instead of up toward the crowd. For the first time in his career as champion, he looked uncertain. Jake Morrison, completely unaware of how important this moment was, simply shrugged. He checked his watch and thought about how much longer he would have to wait for the markets to reopen. He wanted to get his parts and leave the station. The fight had been mildly interesting, but he had work to do. Behind him, aliens from dozens of different species whispered and gestured. Some took pictures with their devices. Others sent urgent messages to their home planets. The news would spread fast through the quantum communication networks that connected the galaxy. The station administrator made an announcement that the challenge was temporarily suspended due to unusual circumstances. The crowd slowly began to disperse, but many stayed to stare at Jake or to discuss what they had witnessed. Jake finally noticed people were looking at him. He felt uncomfortable with the attention and decided to leave the arena. As he walked toward the exit, aliens moved out of his way. Some stepped back quickly. Others watched him pass with new expressions on their faces. The human did not understand why everyone was acting so strange, but he was used to aliens being weird. He made his way back to the market district and was pleased to find some shops starting to reopen early. He bought his replacement parts and loaded them onto a small cargo cart. The shopkeeper, a nervous Torg with purple tentacles, gave him a significant discount without Jake even asking for one. Within hours, Jake was back on his ship preparing for departure. He filed his flight plan with station control and started the engine warm-up sequence. Everything was normal from his perspective. He had come to a station, waded through some local entertainment, bought what he needed, and was now leaving. Just another day of work in the outer reaches. But behind him, the galaxy's perception of humanity had begun to shift. One startled alien at a time, the message spread. Humans were not what they seemed. They were not prey. They were something else. Something that made even the greatest predators pause and reconsider. Lieutenant Commander Kate Phillips received the report 3 days after the incident at Kelvar 9. It came through official Galactic Council channels with a priority flag that made her forget about her coffee. She worked aboard the Earth Alliance vessel called Defiant, which was stationed at the edge of Council space. Her job mainly involved managing diplomatic incidents, usually when human traders accidentally broke some strange alien custom. She had a talent for fixing cultural misunderstandings, which made her very valuable as humanity continued its awkward integration into galactic society. This report was different from anything she had seen before. She read it twice, because she was certain there must be a mistake. A Krell champion had retreated from a human without any combat happening. Not only that, but Vexthar had withdrawn from the arena circuit entirely, saying through his translators that he had experienced spiritual contamination. 3 alien psychologists had sent urgent requests to interview Jake Morrison, the human at the center of the incident. Kate pulled up Morrison's file on her computer. He was a registered independent trader, 42 years old, and originally from Montana on Earth. His record showed many minor violations like unlicensed trading, unauthorized docking, and failure to update flight plans, but nothing violent. His psychological profile described him as unremarkable, persistent and having above-average problem-solving skills. Nothing about Jake Morrison suggested he should terrify a 9-foot apex. Predator Kate started a communication link to Kelvar 9 and managed to reach Morrison on his ship. He was currently hauling grain to a colony 3 systems away. His face appeared on her screen. Looking weathered and slightly annoyed at the interruption, she introduced herself and said she needed to ask him about the incident at Kelvar 9. Jake frowned and asked what incident she was talking about. He said he just watched some kind of alien fight club while waiting for parts. Kate explained that he had made eye contact with a Krell champion and it had retreated. She said this was causing considerable concern in alien psychological circles. Jake looked confused. He asked if she meant the big bug lizard thing. He said he thought it just got bored. He told Kate he did not know what the fuss was about because he had not done anything. Kate said that was precisely what concerned them. She explained that the Krell have specific instinctive responses to threats. They attack, they ignore, or in extremely rare cases, they submit to a superior predator. They do not retreat from prey species. Jake said he was not prey. Kate paused and said that biologically speaking, humans are classified as omnivorous persistence hunters, but in galactic terms they are considered a weaker species. Jake interrupted and asked if she knew what persistence hunting was. Kate said it was the practice of tracking prey over long periods until it became exhausted. She said ancient humans used it before developing advanced weapons. Jake leaned back in his chair and said that was right. He explained that humans are not the fastest and not the strongest, but they do not stop. He suggested that maybe the bug understood that. Maybe it looked at him and saw something that would not quit, would not run, and would not go down easy. Maybe it did the math and decided he was not worth the energy. Kate considered this idea carefully. Humanity's reputation in the galaxy had been built on similar principles. Humans survived where they should not. They adapted to hostile environments. They kept going through obstacles that would make other species quit. They negotiated when they should have surrendered. They explored when they should have retreated. They colonized worlds that other species had written off as impossible to live on. But could a Krell sense all of that from just a simple look? Kate asked if Jake would be willing to undergo some testing. She said the Council's Alien Psychology Division wanted to understand what happened. Jake asked if it would pay. Kate said the Council offers standard compensation for research participation. Jake said sure, why not? But he had a delivery deadline in 6 days. Kate ended the call and began writing her report. But her mind kept returning to Jake's words. We do not stop. It seemed like such a simple thing. Yet perhaps it was enough. Across the station in her private quarters, a scientist named Dr. Lisa Grant was reaching similar conclusions. She had studied Krell behavior for 15 years and had watched the arena footage dozens of times. What she saw went against everything in conventional alien psychology. Krell threat assessment was based on physical capability like size, natural weapons, toxicity, and armor. They had evolved on a death world where everything was trying to kill everything else. They developed incredibly sophisticated predator instincts. They could evaluate an opponent's danger level in microseconds. So why had Vexthar retreated from a human? Lisa pulled up comparison scans on her computer. Humans had no natural weapons, no armor, and no venom. Their endurance was notable but not unique in the galaxy. Their intelligence was high but not unprecedented. Yet something in Jake Morrison's body language, his posture, and his direct gaze had triggered a retreat response. She began reviewing Earth's predator species, looking for patterns. Humans had lived alongside creatures far more dangerous than themselves for millions of years. They had faced saber-toothed cats, cave bears, and dire wolves. They had not been the strongest, but they had survived. Then she found something interesting in the anthropological data. Early humans had a hunting technique that other predators avoided. It was persistence hunting combined with pack tactics, and this was the key part, an absolute refusal to abandon a target once they committed to it. Humans would track wounded prey for days, even weeks. They became not just hunters, but inevitabilities. Ancient Earth predators had learned to recognize humans not as immediate threats, but as long-term problems. It was better to leave them alone than to risk injury, even minor injury, because humans remembered. They came back. They adapted. They brought friends. Could Vexthar's ancient predator instincts have recognized something similar in Jake Morrison? Not a threat to be fought, but a problem to be avoided? Lisa began writing her own report with growing excitement. If she was right, humanity's reputation was about to change dramatically. They were not weak. They were persistent. And persistence, given enough time, beat almost everything else. She included data from multiple sources. She referenced studies of human behavior in crisis situations. She showed examples of how humans approached problems differently from other species. Where most species would calculate odds and retreat when odds were bad, humans tended to push forward anyway. They found creative solutions. They refused to accept that something was impossible. The report took her 2 days to complete. She sent it to every major academic institution in council space. She knew it would be controversial. The entire galactic classification system for species was based on physical attributes and technological advancement. Her research suggested that psychological attributes like persistence and refusal to quit might be just as important, maybe more so. Within hours of publishing, her communication device was flooded with messages. Some scientists were skeptical. Others were fascinated. A few were angry that she was challenging established theories. But everyone was talking about it. News networks picked up the story. The incident at Kelvar 9 had already been spreading through unofficial channels, but now it had scientific backing. Shows and podcasts across the galaxy began discussing the human question. What were these strange soft-skinned creatures that made Krell champions retreat? Were they dangerous? Were they some kind of hidden predator that the galaxy had underestimated? Jake Morrison continued hauling his grain cargo, completely unaware that he had become the subject of intense scientific debate. He made his delivery on time, collected his payment, and started looking for his next job. Business was good. The shipping lanes were busy, and there was always demand for reliable transport. He did notice that some aliens were treating him differently. At the refueling station, the attendant seemed more polite than usual. At the cargo exchange, other captains gave him respectful nods. A Vryn merchant offered him a contract without the usual lengthy negotiation. Word spread through the outer reaches with the speed of quantum communications. The human who made a Krell retreat. The soft skin who stared down a champion. The prey that became predator. Stories grew with each telling, and Jake Morrison found himself unexpectedly famous, which he considered a significant inconvenience. His cargo rates increased because clients wanted to say they had worked with that human, but so did the number of challenges he received. Warriors from a dozen species wanted to test themselves against him, to prove that Vexthar's retreat had been just a strange mistake. Most challenges Jake politely declined. He was not a fighter, and he had no interest in proving anything to aliens with more pride than sense. But some challenges could not be refused. Not if he wanted to continue trading in the outer reaches. The message came through official channels, marked with the seal of the Vryn Syndicate. Jake read it twice, his jaw tightening. He immediately contacted Commander Kate Phillips. Kate's face appeared on his communication screen with a worried expression. She asked what happened. Jake said he had been challenged by a Vryn Blademaster. He explained that refusing would be considered an insult to their entire clan. His trade license would be revoked, and he would probably be banned from a dozen systems. Kate said the Vryn do not play games. She said they are not like the Krell because they study their opponents and exploit weaknesses. If he accepted, he would need to actually fight. Jake said he knew that. He pulled up the challenge details on his screen. The duel was scheduled for Station Omega-7 on neutral ground. Standard Vryn rules meant bladed weapons only, and the fight continued until first blood or submission. Kate was quiet for a long moment. She said she could try to get this overturned through diplomatic channels, but it would take time. The Vryn were council members with full rights. They could issue legitimate challenges. Jake asked how long it would take. Kate said weeks, maybe months. Jake said the duel was in 4 days. He said he would need a weapon and a very quick lesson in alien anatomy. Kate wanted to argue and find another solution, but she recognized the look in Jake's eyes. He had already made his decision. She said she would have a tactical package sent to his ship. It would include Vryn physiology, fighting styles, and weakness points. She told him not to try to beat the Blademaster, just to survive. First blood was enough. The tactical package arrived within hours. It was a comprehensive file compiled by Earth Alliance intelligence. Jake spent the next 3 days studying, practicing with a blade in his ship's small cargo hold, and trying not to think too hard about the fact that he was about to fight an alien warrior who had trained their entire life for this. The Vryn Blademaster was named Kelth Zahn, a veteran of 40 duels with 0 losses. The Vryn species were slender and quick. Their bodies were covered in fine scales that provided minimal protection, but incredible flexibility. They had 4 fingers on each hand, each tipped with retractable claws. Their fighting style emphasized speed and precision over raw power. Station Omega-7 was packed when Jake arrived. News of the duel had spread, and it seemed like half the outer reaches wanted to watch. The arena here was smaller than Kelvar 9, but the atmosphere was just as charged. This was not just a duel. It was a test. Would the human who had made a Krell retreat actually prove dangerous? Or had Vexthar simply been strange? Jake stepped into the arena wearing basic protective gear and carrying a standard combat knife. It was 20 centimeters of folded steel, simple and reliable. Across from him, Kelthzon entered with ceremonial grace. The alien carried twin curved blades and spun them in an elegant display of skill that impressed the crowd. The crowd fell silent as the referee, a neutral Centaurian, explained the rules in multiple languages. First blood or submission. No lethal strikes. Honor the outcome. Jake barely listened. He was watching Kelthzon, studying the alien's movements, looking for patterns. The Vryn was fast, incredibly fast, but there was a rhythm to the blade display. Every culture developed patterns even in chaos. The referee signaled the start. Kelthzon moved like liquid, closing the distance in a heartbeat. The twin blades came in from different angles, trying to overwhelm Jake's defense. This was a textbook Vryn opening, designed to force the opponent to block one blade while the other found its mark. Jake did not block. He moved backward, not in a retreat but in a measured step, letting both blades pass through the space where he had been. It was not elegant. It was not skilled. It was simple spatial awareness, something every human learned growing up in a three-dimensional world. Kelthzon adjusted and came in again with a different combination. Jake evaded, his movements economical and ungraceful. He was not trying to win. He was trying not to lose, which was entirely different. The Vryn Blade Master increased the speed. The blades became silver blurs cutting through the air. The crowd gasped at the display of skill. But Jake noticed something important. Kelthzon was breathing harder. The Vryn metabolism was built for short bursts of incredible speed, not extended effort. Jake, meanwhile, felt fine. Humans might not be fast, but they could keep going for hours. Persistence hunters. He began to counter not with attacks but with positioning. Every time Kelthzon committed to a strike, Jake moved to a place that forced the Vryn to reset to use more energy. It was frustrating and unglamorous combat, but it was working. 10 minutes into the duel, Kelthzon was visibly tired. The blade work remained precise, but the speed was dropping. The Vryn warrior's eyes showed something new in their expression. It was concern. Jake saw his opening, not an opportunity to strike, but an opportunity to end this. He stepped in during one of Kelthzon's combinations. He accepted a shallow cut on his forearm while his own blade came up to rest gently against the Vryn's throat. First blood. To both of them. The referee looked uncertain, consulting the rules on a small device. Technically, Jake had been cut first, but he had also achieved a killing position. The crowd erupted in argument about what this meant. Kelthzon stepped back, breathing heavily. The alien spoke through their translator device. The human wins. He sacrificed first blood to achieve dominance. This is acceptable under honor code. Jake lowered his knife, pressing a hand against his bleeding forearm. It was not a deep cut, but it stung. He said it was a good fight. Kelthzon stared at him with reptilian eyes and said, Jake was not skilled with a blade. Jake agreed and said no, he was not. The alien said yet he had won. Jake said he had not quit. He headed toward the exit, already thinking about bandages and the delivery he still needed to make. Behind him, Kelthzon turned to address the crowd. The alien's voice came through the translation system clearly. The humans are not warriors as we understand them. They are something else, something patient, something that endures. The Krell was wise to retreat. The crowd remained in stunned silence as Jake left the arena. Medical staff tried to stop him to treat his wound, but he waved them off, saying it was just a scratch. He made his way back to his ship, applied a basic medical patch to his arm, and filed his departure clearance. Within an hour, he was back in space, his ship's engine humming steadily as he plotted a course to his next destination. The duel was already behind him, just another strange experience in a galaxy full of them. He had work to do, cargo to haul, and a schedule to keep. But behind him, the recording of the duel was being transmitted across the galaxy. Analysis began immediately. Military strategists studied his movements. Psychologists examined his calm demeanor. Philosophers debated what it meant that a human had won not through skill, but through refusal to quit. The galaxy was beginning to understand something important about humanity. They were not strong in the traditional sense. They were not fast or naturally armed, but they had something that might be more valuable. They had the ability to keep going when others would stop. They could endure. They could persist. And persistence, as the galaxy was learning, was a power all its own. Dr. Lisa Grant's research paper was published simultaneously across 17 academic networks, and within a day it had been downloaded over 1 million times. The title was simple but powerful: Persistence as Predation, Reassessing Human Threat Classification. It challenged decades of alien biological assumptions and provided a framework for understanding the incidents at Kelvar 9 and Omega 7. Her thesis was simple but profound. Humans were not apex predators in the traditional sense. They were endurance predators, and endurance predation triggered different instinctive responses in prey species, or in this case, other predators. Kate Phillips found herself forwarding the paper to every diplomatic contact she had, along with incident reports that were flooding in from across council space. The pattern was undeniable and growing stronger every day. On Station Helix Prime, a human engineer named Ben Carter had walked through a territory dispute between two Dravok warriors. Neither had stopped him. They had instinctively moved aside, unwilling to engage with something that registered as neither prey nor rival, but as something persistent and problematic. On the agricultural world of Ven 3, a human farming collective had established settlements in regions that predatory species had claimed as hunting grounds. The predators relocated without any conflict, not out of fear, but out of the same instinct that made animals avoid angry beehives. Too much trouble, not worth the energy. In the Sigma Quadrant, a human exploration team had encountered a xenoform nest, one of the most dangerous species known to Council space. The creatures normally attacked anything that entered their territory. They had observed the humans for 3 days and then withdrawn deeper into their tunnels. Follow-up studies showed the xenoforms had classified the humans as persistent nuisance. Dangerous not because of strength, but because they would not go away, and would eventually become a larger problem. The pattern repeated across hundreds of encounters. Whenever humans encountered aggressive species, refused to show fear and maintained calm persistence, the instinctive response was avoidance. Humanity had discovered something like a cheat code in galactic predator behavior: be more trouble than you are worth. Kate presented her compiled findings to the Earth Alliance Strategic Command, a group of admirals and politicians who were struggling to understand humanity's changing role in the galaxy. Admiral Richard Hayes spoke slowly as he processed the information. He asked if Kate was telling them that humans had accidentally been intimidating the galaxy's warrior species by simply acting normally. Kate said that in essence, yes sir, that was correct. She explained that when humans refused to flee, refused to submit and maintain direct eye contact with apex predators, they trigger avoidance responses that evolved over millions of years. Humans are not threatening immediate harm. They are threatening persistence, which is arguably worse. The Admiral asked, worse in what way? Kate explained that immediate threats can be fought and defeated. Persistent threats wear you down, adapt to your tactics, and keep coming back. Ancient Earth predators learned that humans were not worth fighting, because even if you won, you would take damage. And injured predators do not survive long. Better to avoid the problem entirely. One of the politicians leaned forward and asked if they could weaponize this phenomenon. Kate felt her stomach tighten. She said that was exactly what they should not do. She explained that this works because humans genuinely do not back down from challenges and genuinely persist through obstacles. If they tried to artificially create intimidating behavior, alien species would recognize the deception. This only works because it is authentic. The politician said it still gives humanity a significant advantage in negotiations. Kate corrected him and said it gives them respect. Respect they have earned by surviving in environments that should have killed them, by persisting through obstacles that should have stopped them, and by refusing to give up even when they should. That is not a weapon. That is who humans are. The discussion continued for hours, but Kate knew the decision was already made. Humanity would not try to exploit this phenomenon. They would simply continue being human, stubborn, persistent, and unreasonably optimistic about their chances of survival. Meanwhile, across Council space, other species were having their own discussions about the human question. In the Krell homeworld strategic chambers, military planners reviewed the Vexthar incident and reached an uncomfortable conclusion. Humans should be treated as peer predators, not prey. Engaging them required careful consideration, not instinctive aggression. The Vryn Syndicate circulated Kel'Thuzon's fight recording with new commentary. The human had not won through skill. He had won through refusal to quit, turning the duel into a war of attrition that favored his physiology. Future challenges against humans would need different strategies. Even the normally aloof Zentari Empire, whose military prowess was legendary, quietly updated their threat assessment protocols. A new classification appeared in their databases called persistent actors. This category was for species that could not be intimidated, could not be worn down, and could not be reliably predicted because they refused to follow standard behavioral patterns. Humans were the only species in that category. Dr. Grant watched the galactic response to her paper with mixed feelings. She had proven her thesis, but she worried about the implications. Would humans become targets? Would other species try to test these findings? Or would humanity finally earn the respect they had been quietly building toward for 40 years? The answer came from an unexpected source. Vexthar, the Krell champion who had retreated from Jake Morrison, requested a formal interview through council channels. It was granted, and the recording was broadcast across the galaxy. Vexthar spoke through translators while his bioluminescent patterns pulsed calmly. He said he had retreated because he recognized a truth that others of his kind had forgotten. The Krell test themselves against other predators, believing that combat proves worth. But the human in that arena proved worth through stillness, through the refusal to flee or submit. He did not need to fight. His presence alone made combat meaningless. To attack him would be to acknowledge him as prey, but he was not prey. To challenge him would be to acknowledge him as rival, but he was not rival. He was simply there, immovable, persistent. Vexthar had no protocol for such a being, so he retreated, and in retreating he learned wisdom. The interview became the most watched broadcast in council history. Not because it showed human strength, but because it showed something more valuable: human nature. They were not conquerors or warriors. They were survivors who simply refused to quit. Jake Morrison watched the interview from his ship while hauling cargo through the void. He shrugged and went back to work. He had deliveries to make, and the galaxy was not going to stop just because a bunch of aliens had figured out what humans had always known. Persistence pays. Other incidents continued to be reported. A human medical team on a war-torn planet refused to evacuate, despite being ordered to leave by 3 different military factions. They stayed and continued treating wounded civilians. Eventually, all 3 factions declared the hospital neutral ground because forcing the humans to leave seemed like more trouble than it was worth. A human trading company established a route through pirate-controlled space. Instead of paying protection money or hiring military escorts, they simply kept running the route. Pirates attacked the first few ships. The humans replaced them and kept going. After losing ships and crew fighting humans who kept coming back, the pirates declared the route off-limits. It was bad for business. A human colony on a hostile ice world refused to abandon their settlement when 3 different species said the planet was uninhabitable. The humans built underground complexes, developed new heating technology, and turned the frozen wasteland into a productive farming community. Other species began asking humans for advice on colonizing difficult worlds. The pattern was clear and consistent. Humans did not win through strength or speed or natural advantages. They won through persistence, adaptation, and an almost irrational refusal to accept defeat as permanent. 6 months after the Kelvar 9 incident, humanity's position in the Galactic Council had fundamentally changed. They were not feared exactly, but they were respected in a way that no other species quite understood. Earth Alliance received formal recognition as a Tier 2 power, jumping 3 classification levels in an unprecedented move. With that recognition came new opportunities and new responsibilities. Humans were invited to join peacekeeping operations, exploration initiatives, and most surprisingly, conflict mediation roles. Kate Phillips found herself promoted to commander and assigned to a new position as Chief Human Cultural Liaison. Her job was to help other species understand what made humans different, and more importantly, to help humans understand the power they had inadvertently discovered. She established training programs across Earth Alliance space, teaching human traders, explorers, and colonists about the persistence phenomenon, not how to weaponize it, but how to understand it and use it responsibly. She told a class of new merchant marine captains that they all had this ability. When they refuse to panic in crisis situations, when they keep working on problems that seem unsolvable, when they maintain calm in the face of aggression, they trigger ancient instincts in species that evolved very differently. Those species are not scared of humans. They are recognizing that humans are not worth the trouble of fighting. One captain raised his hand and asked what happens if they encounter species that do not have those instincts. What if they run into species that fight anyway? Kate said then they do what humans have always done. They adapt, they persist, and they find a way through. That is the real lesson. Humans did not become influential because they are strong. They became influential because they do not quit. Jake Morrison continued hauling cargo through the outer reaches, though his routes had become considerably more profitable. He found that being the human who made a Krell retreat came with certain advantages. Pirates avoided his ships. Customs inspectors processed his paperwork quickly. Merchants paid premium rates for cargo delivered by someone with his reputation. He did not let it go to his head. In his mind, he was still just a guy trying to make a living in a weird and hostile galaxy. But he noticed changes in how aliens interacted with him. More respect, more curiosity, less casual dismissal. On one run to a frontier station, a young Dravok warrior approached him in a bar. The alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, covered in dense muscle and natural armor. In the old days, Jake would have been automatically classified as prey. Now the Dravok spoke with careful politeness. The warrior said Jake was the human from Kelvar 9. Jake confirmed that was him. The Dravok said he wished to understand. How did Jake defeat a Krell champion without fighting? Jake considered his answer carefully. He said he did not defeat anyone. He just did not run away. Where he came from, that was not special. That was just how humans handle problems. The warrior asked why not run. The Krell could have killed him. Jake said maybe that was true, but running would not have solved anything. The Krell would still be there tomorrow. Better to face it and see what happens. The Dravok was silent for a long moment, processing this. He asked if humans do not calculate odds of survival. Jake said, oh, humans calculate odds all the time. They just do not let bad odds stop them if something needs doing. The warrior left looking thoughtful, and Jake went back to his drink. He was aware that conversations like this were happening all over Council space, gradually shifting how the galaxy viewed humanity. Dr. Lisa Grant continued her research, expanding her findings into broader theories about predator-prey dynamics and how social species disrupted traditional classifications. She received a council grant to study other persistence predators throughout the galaxy, looking for similar patterns. What she found surprised her. Humans were not unique in their persistence, but they were unique in how they combined it with other traits. High intelligence meant they adapted their persistence strategies. Social cooperation meant they could maintain pressure indefinitely through shift work and resource sharing. And perhaps most importantly, optimism meant they believed persistence would pay off, which became a self-fulfilling prophecy. She wrote in her follow-up paper that humans were accidentally optimized for galactic society. Their evolution on a challenging world with diverse predators taught them to persist through obstacles while remaining social and adaptable. These same traits made them ideal for the complex multi-species environment of Council space. They do not conquer. They integrate. They do not dominate. They persist until accepted. And acceptance, given enough time, is more powerful than conquest. The Earth Alliance Strategic Command, having observed 6 months of changing galactic dynamics, convened to discuss humanity's long-term strategy. Admiral Hayes, who had initially wanted to weaponize the persistence phenomenon, had changed his perspective. He told the assembly that humans had been given a gift. Not a weapon, but a path forward. Other species expand through military might or economic dominance. Humans can expand through persistence and integration. They become the species that never quits, that always shows up, that can be relied upon to see things through. That is more valuable than any weapon. The decision was made to lean into humanity's natural tendencies. Earth Alliance would focus on long-term projects that other species found tedious, terraforming worlds that would take centuries to complete, establishing trade routes that required decades of unprofitable operation before paying off, mediating conflicts that had lasted so long that other species had given up trying to resolve them. Humanity would become the galaxy's specialists in persistence. The strategy proved remarkably effective. Within 2 years, Human colonies existed on worlds that other species had deemed too difficult. Human trading companies operated routes that others had abandoned as unsustainable. Human diplomats brokered peace agreements in conflicts that others had labeled unsolvable. And through it all, individual humans like Jake Morrison continued doing what they had always done, showing up, doing the work, and refusing to quit when things got difficult. 5 years after Kelvar 9, the Galactic Council held a ceremony recognizing humanity's elevation to Tier 1 status, the fastest rise in Council history. Commander Kate Phillips accepted the recognition with a simple speech that captured the essence of humanity's journey. She said humans did not come to the stars seeking recognition or power. They came because they were curious, because they wanted to see what was out there, because they had never been very good at staying in one place. Along the way, they discovered that their greatest strength was not technology or numbers or military might. It was simpler than that. They show up. They do the work. They do not quit when things get hard. That is not special to humans. That is just how they have always lived. But if the galaxy values that trait, if their persistence has earned them a place among the stars, then they are honored, and they will keep doing what they do best, persisting, adapting, and never giving up. The speech was translated into 600 languages and broadcast across Council space. It was not particularly eloquent or profound, but it resonated with a truth that every species recognized. Humans were here to stay. Not because they were the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced, but because they simply would not leave. They would persist through every obstacle, adapt to every challenge, and keep showing up regardless of the odds. Jake Morrison watched the ceremony from his ship's cockpit while running a cargo route to the outer reaches. He smiled and raised his coffee mug in a private toast. Then he went back to work because he had a delivery to make, and the galaxy was not going to stop, just because humanity had proven a point. Out in the void, Earth's ships carried human crews to thousands of worlds, each person embodying the same traits that had made their species special. They were not heroes or warriors or conquerors. They were explorers, traders, engineers, and colonists who simply refused to accept failure as final. The predator had drawn its blade and scanned the crowd, looking for prey or rivals. Instead, it had found something that fit neither category: a human standing calmly, refusing to run, impossible to classify by instinct alone. And in that moment of confusion, the galaxy's understanding of humanity had changed forever.